Very quickly, you didn't want to get involved in the Ukraine conflict militarily for obvious reasons. Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
Well, of course, it's not the commitment that was made, actually. The commitment that was made is military assistance, equipment. But Rick, it's been called strategic. The U.S. policy has been called strategic ambiguity. And, that's as someone's been practicing law for 40 years, that's a good phrase, strategically ambiguous. What is that? What is our policy in Taiwan? What is the actual policy right now as it relates to Taiwan?
First of all, I think, Jay, we have to call out President Biden and that question from the reporter, which was an assumption, erroneous assumption right away. That reporter said, in Ukraine, you didn't want to get involved for obvious reasons. Let's remember that the first Joe Biden policy in Ukraine was to offer Zelensky a ride out of Ukraine. He wanted to get the Ukrainians out of the way, which means that so that Russia had the ability just to do what they wanted to do, get out of the way and remove Zelensky from that. That is the original Biden policy. But now what we have in this strategic ambiguity, which is really purposefully evasive, is what it should be called. What we're trying to do is have it both ways. And what Joe Biden did was really unsuccessfully have it both ways. You want to be able to talk about America's strength and our resolve and our commitment to democracy and the rule of law. But you also don't want to say that we're going to get into a war with China. And so it's this idea that you have to have a credible threat of military action. Unfortunately, Joe Biden has the credibility part missing. He's not credible, and yet he's trying to make a threat.
Rick, my question here too is on this kind of one China policy that gets discussed, and the idea that we don't necessarily accept, but we recognize China's oversight. We recognize or acknowledge that China claims to have authority over Taiwan. These statements, I mean, they are very important. I just want to underscore it. When the President of the United States, even if it's Joe Biden, says we're going to go to war, and then they have to walk it back. I mean, that again, it sends that signal that he doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's not clear. The administration doesn't have a clear policy, or at least they're not briefing him on a clear policy.
You're a smart guy. You're going to get me in trouble here, Jordan, because you're asking the poignant question, which is, wait a minute, one China policy seems to be a little bit at odds with our ability or our desire to want to defend Taiwan or help Taiwan in some ways. And I think you're exactly right. Look, the one China policy means that China gets to decide its territorial issues, its sovereignty issues. And in theory, that sounds right. Like, oh, we want other countries to be able to figure out their borders. But what one China policy really means is that China believes Taiwan is theirs, and we, the United States, are just not going to get involved. And that's where we have this strategic ambiguity, where we say one China policy, but we're defending or wanting to defend or talking about defending Taiwan and wanting to have a closer relationship with Taiwan. So literally, you're asking the very good, tough questions where diplomats try to be ambiguous about, we're trying to play both sides.
So, Rick, let me ask you this. If China were to make a move on Taiwan militarily, what does the U.S. do? And what does the rest of the world do? Because getting into a armed conflict with China doesn't have a good outcome, I don't think.
This is just a morning of direct questions.
Sorry. Well, I think because I think the American people, because I think Joe Biden created this by his statements. He said multiple times now, we're going to respond militarily, and gets people thinking we're going to have World War IV now if you include the Ukraine as 3. What do you do if they get attacked?
This is why people should be listening to us, listening to ACLJ. You go right for the heart of it. Yep. You go right into the issues. Look, I think the answer, Jay, is I'm going to go back, and it's going to sound like I'm ditching the question, but I'm really not. you've got to have a credible threat of military action, because if you have a president who talks about strength and what America can do, not what America won't do, then you don't get yourself in the situation where other countries are testing us. We know there wouldn't have been a war in Ukraine if Donald Trump were in office, because he would have sent early signals of strength of what we would do. When you have a weak president, you invite all of these tests. You invite all of these people to push the envelope. And that's what's happening with China right now. Look, the reality is that America needs to be able to stand firm for democracy, the rule of law. But the question becomes, at what point, when another country sends in troops, a nuclear armed country sends in troops, are we going to say, what is the threat of national security to the United States? At the end of the day, what my criteria is, when are we and our people and our allies threatened?
It was interesting. Randall on YouTube asked this for you, Rick. How is the Biden administration going to defend Taiwan when they've already sold out to the CCP? That's a really,
great question.
very pointed
and
question.
Also, I think President Xi is looking at the Afghanistan debacle and saying, this is the guy that is going to try to defend Taiwan, when he was proud to get 90% of the people out of the Americans out of Afghanistan, signaling that 10% would be left behind. That's total weakness. And so, again, you got to have a credible threat of military action, not just a threat of military action.
You know, Rick, I want to kind of talk about, because the domestic impact these all have, and we're seeing the inflation numbers. We're in the political season now. Big primaries tomorrow night. We've already seen some big primaries. We're still waiting on some others, which is a little absurd, by the way, that Pennsylvania can't get numbers. It just shows you when we talk about election integrity issues and also getting our systems up to speed, the problems. Even in a primary, you can't figure out who's won, more than a week later. But these issues, Rick, I think they all get back to the kind of core issues. We were talking about the border issues and Title 42, basically a Trump-appointed federal court district judge saving the country with Title 42 a little bit on the immigration issue this weekend, but the Biden DOJ is going to appeal it. We see again, what's going on in Ukraine, this kind of stalemate. Are we going to continue to send billions and billions of dollars over? We saw some Republican senators step up and say, no, this is not right, because we don't know where this money is going or how it's being spent. And then you add on to this in an even more complicated situation, which is how to deal with China. I mean, and how compromised this administration seems to already be. If you're in Taiwan and you're getting all these U.S. resources, is that basically, are you basically looking at yourself as like a mini Ukraine, and you think I might get the resources at best, but at the end of the day, they're not coming to help me even with this Biden gaffe?
I might get the resources too late. I think the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government would say that the Biden administration was way too late. And again, Donald Trump wanted to sell arms to Ukraine, and Joe Biden is now scrambling to give them the arms. And I think that this is one of those situations where weakness breeds more problems, and we've talked about this a lot. But if you're in Taiwan, you have to be nervous about Joe Biden. I hope that the American people understand, Taiwanese Americans, Ukrainian Americans, Iranian Americans, that when you have a leader like Joe Biden sending weak signals around the world, it's going to get worse. Remember, he took the Houthis off the terrorist list, and the Houthis then started bombing the UAE, a country that had literally signed a peace treaty with Israel, and yet now is getting bombed by Iranian-backed terrorists. And so you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Donald Trump literally brought us a great economy and world peace, and Joe Biden has done the opposite.
I was just going to say, Rick, I know we have time. I'm looking at the front page of the New York Times. I just pulled it up. Just had a chance. Biden says U.S. military would defend Taiwan and China if invaded. Biden to begin new Asia-Pacific economic bloc. Zelensky urges global business elites to punish Russia further. This has all happened since President Trump left office. We're faced with Russia and China in ways we never imagined. Rick, we appreciate your comments. Glad you're part of the team.
Yeah, Rick, Rick brought up that World Health Organization just in passing last week on the broadcast. We're on it, folks. Our team is researching actually through ACLJ Action first. Now we're going to get our legal team on it as well, so that you know the truth. So when we get all that together, we're going to get the facts to you on what the Biden administration is planning and not planning, because we're truth tellers with the WHO, and we're getting as much info as we can before we start getting into the details with you. We know you want the info, but we want to get you precise, exact info. And again, as always, I want you to support our work at ACLJ.org. There's a lot of new great pieces up, too, that just went out over the weekend up at ACLJ.org. We'll be right back.